County here, isn't it?
Good afternoon.
Long walk. I gotta get a pedometer just to see how many miles I walked up
At
here.
this point, we will now call the February 28th, 2019 Diversion Board of Authority to order. And could we get a roll call, please?
Mrs. Sherling?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Steen?
Here.
Dr. Mahoney?
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn? Mr. Grinberg? Mr. Judd? Mr. Hendrickson?
Here.
Mr. Paulson? Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Wayland?
Here.
Mr. Thorsted?
Here.
Mr. Olson?
Here.
Great. Thank you all for joining me, and thank you for those in attendance for being here as well. Appreciate your interest and your hard work. We have in front of you the minutes from the last meeting. Motion to approve.
So moved, Wayland.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Any additions or corrections to those minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And you have the order of the agenda in front of you. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? If not, I would take a motion to approve the agenda order.
Moved by Campbell.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, and a second by Peterson. And any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And we'll move on to the management, the program management report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Pleasure to provide you with the program management consultant update for February 28th. Really a list, starting with a list of activities and accomplishments that are really achieved by a number of you sitting behind the dais as well as the members of your staff. But starting with a successful February trip to Washington, D.C. to visit the congressional delegations, U.S. Army Corps of Engineer headquarters, the Assistant Secretary of the Army's office, and OMB. And I think there may be some additional comments on that later. Of course, the permit application was submitted to Buffalo Red River Watershed District. Testified to the North Dakota State Appropriations Committee in support of the North Dakota funding request, and successfully advocated for legislative priorities related to timely land acquisition on the North Dakota side. Members of the authority supported a $39 million state of Minnesota funding bill that was introduced in the state of Minnesota legislature. The Cass County Joint Water Resource District received proposals from 8 appraisal services firms, and they'll be entering into contracts with all of those firms. And this is the first real activity increasing the focus on acquiring lands, which was a priority identified in your last meeting. Technical team continued hydraulic modeling refinements for the FEMA conditional letter of map revision, or CLOMAR. For March priority areas, obviously continuing to coordinate with Minnesota DNR and the Corps with the objective to dismiss litigation and remove injunction. Continuing outreach to local entities in the DNR regarding the DNR permit status and its process. Expect that the CLOMAR will be submitted to FEMA, the revised CLOMAR submitted to FEMA in March. And it's anticipated that we'll advertise Work Package 50A, which is some rural structural removals for land acquisition. Advancing land acquisition activities will obviously continue. Land outreach, there's approximately 550 letters and maps to affected property owners in the mail. They will continue with early voluntary land acquisitions, initiating appraisals for remaining properties for the channel, and scoping the next phases of ag impacts and flowage easement studies. And that concludes the activities and priorities, and I can move into some budget items. With respect to overall program status, as discussed last meeting, the program budget is now being reported against the $2.75 billion budget in 2018 dollars. So actual cost to date through the end of January is $445,513,944, leaving your remaining program budget of approximately $2.3 billion. And with considering program financing cost and outstanding accounts payable, that below-the-line number then matches with the financial reports produced by Kent and as fiscal agent. The 2019 cash budget, we are still reporting against the Q1 budget, and I think Rick may have some comments on that during his Finance Committee report, but it is approximately 8.5 million. In January, paid amounts were approximately 1.3 million, leaving a remaining Q1 budget of about $7.2 million. And that concludes the PMC report for this month.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. Any questions from any of the board members on that? Then we'll move on to item number 5, the Frederickson and Byron Agreement. Mr. Shockley, are you going to present that?
I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Before the Diversion Authority Board, you have the Frederickson and Byron Agreement to provide legislative and governmental relations services for the years of 2019 through 2020. The Minnesota members of the Diversion Authority had met as a group to decide how best to pursue the Minnesota efforts regarding achieving funding for the Diversion Authority. As part of that meeting, they had both the Clay County Administrator and the Moorhead City Manager attend the meeting, along with representatives from Frederickson and Byron. Specifically discussed at the meeting was the need to have additional reports provided on a more regular basis. And that was acknowledged by Frederickson and Byron, and they indicated that they would be providing more regular reports. They also wanted, there was also a significant discussion about the primary contacts for Minnesota legislative lobbying activities. And the group felt that it was most appropriate to have the Moorhead City Manager and the Clay County Administrator be those primary contacts, given that the Minnesota legislative process has some complexity to it. The Minnesota legislature meets for very long terms, and it requires oftentimes they'll have a hearing where there's very short notice, and it's difficult for the Minnesota members to drive down on a short notice, a 4-hour drive to get to the legislature. And so there was a lot of thought put into that, and then also some discussion about what the strategy would be moving forward in the upcoming legislative session. That subsequently resulted in the drafting of a bill that has been submitted for funding of the Diversion Authority and in some in-town work, currently in the amount of $39 million. We would expect that there'll be the next session an additional bill to get up to that $86 million in total. The way the Minnesota legislature works is slightly different than the North Dakota legislature. The North Dakota will do pay-as-you-go, whereas Minnesota, they do a lot of this through bonding. And so it's submitted as part of the bonding. They get a lump sum of $39 million, and then you go into the next legislative cycle. Once again, the agreement is from 2019 to 2020. The primary contacts will be the Moorhead City Manager and the Clay County Administrator. We would anticipate that the reports will come back to the Diversion Authority, but for the day-to-day primary contact, if there was a question, those two would answer it. I believe, and I'm not seeing the Moorhead City Manager present, but there was some discussion about we'd like to see the representative Frederickson Byron appear before the Diversion Authority Board, and my understanding is the city manager didn't think that would be an issue, and that we'd try to make arrangements so that they could come up and visit the board. I can certainly answer any questions you might have. Also, I know the Minnesota member has spent some time and had a lot of discussion about this, and it has already produced some good results for the Diversion Authority.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, thank you,
Mr. Campbell.
thank you, Madam Chair. As Martin had mentioned too in his PMC report, there is now a bill before the Minnesota legislature for $39 million that would wrap up the $43 million portion of the in-town work as part of this overall $86 million that we're hoping we can get from the state of Minnesota. We decided to focus on those in-town levies at this point in time. While there still is some question moving forward, we thought this would be the best way to go. There has been a letter sent to the governor and to the commissioner of the DNR talking about this being done over 3 bienniums, so the 86 million. So I think it's really important for us to act in favor of this. I think it's crucial for us to have somebody there present and not only watching not only for working on behalf of us for the funding, but also watching other legislation that may or may not be beneficial to our project. So it's even more so than just a report or just a focus on funding. So I would certainly encourage our board to act in favor of this renewed contract.
Thank you. Mayor Mahoney.
Or Joel or Kevin, I'm just curious why the 39 versus 43. Was there some magic in the 39 versus the 43?
Well, the reason it's 39 is because of that 43, 4 million has already been approved.
From the DNR that we
Yeah,
got.
so the 39 is the remaining portion of the 43 that has not already been designated.
And so could we have some documentation somewhere just saying the intent of the 2 bienniums and that it's going to be really 43 and 43? I think that's helpful for us when we go to Bismarck tomorrow, just to tell them Minnesota's in for its 86, and here's their intent of how to get it. Because I was under the impression at one time we were going to go 2020, 2020, so this is fantastic news.
So,
And the second issue is good now, you guys know this person very well. You don't necessarily have to come up here and talk to us. I'm assuming you talk to him when you go down to St. Paul. Is that
He's from Moorhead, and he served on the city council, and he served in the state legislature, and he's one of the top lobbyists in Minnesota, so.
And you guys like him a lot. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
You know, we've used them for the city items for many, many years, and been very pleased with the results. And I think you can see right now the underpass project that's ongoing in Moorhead was a result of Frederickson's lobbying for us. So.
Well, I don't know if John was suggesting he come up and talk to us, but my recommendation would be to approve the contract, but to have you guys decide what type of reporting mechanism you want to have, and maybe the chair, however the chair wants to know what's come out of that. But it's just like we have a group working on the North Dakota issues, and it seems like, you know, we don't necessarily share that with the whole board all the time. It's sometimes things that everybody's working on. Chad's out there saying things we don't even know what he's talking about sometimes. But,
I make up most of what's done.
yeah, but so some stuff that's hard when you have a lobbyist. You don't necessarily put that all out in public of what you're working on. A lot of it's very sensitive of how they do that. So, however, the Minnesota delegation feels about his reports or what he needs to do, my vote would be to let you guys figure that out.
Commissioner.
yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mahoney, the discussions that we've had with Mr. Goodnow was that we expected to see monthly reporting, and the monthly reporting would be in a written form that would go, as Mr. Shockley talked about, to our county and city people, as well as our executive committee of the Diversion Authority. And through that process, then we can determine, based on that information and those reports, if there's anything that's significant and important to report back to the full board. We certainly, anytime the Diversion Authority would want to have a in-person report from him, all we got to do is ask and they'll be here.
Well, Kevin, when you said 39 million, you had me at hello.
Anything further? The only thing that I would add to this is, in the contract, it does mention that in addition to reporting to Clay County and City of Moorhead administrators, that the reporting mechanism also go to whoever the diversion board chooses. And I want to make sure that we're starting to lay some really good groundwork for our new executive director, whoever he or she may be. And I really feel strongly that there should be a direct line of communication going to one of our co-executive directors now, so we can start that process, because that really is going to be the person that's going to be the orchestra leader here. And I just don't want to have any delays in contracts. This one could have potentially been delayed if we wouldn't have brought it forward today. So, you know, if it goes directly to one of those two people, I think that it would just be a little more coordinated effort. So they're both smiling back there, I see.
I have one more comment.
Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, one more comment. Going back to, Tim, your comment about wanting to have some documentation that shows this. I think we can provide you with the letter. There was also the cover letter that went to the governor and to the commissioners I mentioned. That was signed by the mayor of Moorhead and also our county board chair. So we can send that along with a copy of the $39 million bill itself that can show that it's in place. If that will help you, we'd be more than happy to provide that to you.
Maybe
And
John
having,
or Rocky can coordinate that, so we'd have that, because we're going to talk to Jim Schmidt tomorrow. I'd like to have that.
So really two different discussions going on here, but
yeah, and having said that, I would move item number 5A.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Wonderful. And the motion carries, and we are very, very pleased that we're moving forward with financing in Minnesota. So we look forward to get that documentation so we can share that with our friends in North Dakota. Moving on to item number 6, public outreach, the committee report. Mr. Schneider.
I am Rocky Schneider with AE2S, part of the program management consultant. We had a good public outreach meeting yesterday in the new room here. It was nice to see a good audience. We have a number of outreach activities underway. One you'll hear about later we heard a little bit about it, but I think under the lands update's probably the most significant outreach effort underway. But we do have several other things going on the Minnesota side especially, that maybe I could ask Commissioner Campbell to update on our efforts there.
Sure. This next Tuesday, our Diversion Authority Chair, Mary, and myself are going to be going to Becker County and Otter Tail County. Both boards were on their agendas to, we've actually never been before those boards before to give them presentations about the project. So we're going to go there and update them on kind of a real high-level history and the start of this thing and where we're at today, and look for their future support as we know this in ways benefits some of their residents from both of those counties. So that's going to be this coming Tuesday that we're going to be doing that. And thank you, Mary, for agreeing to go along with us. So that's what I have to report on the Minnesota side. I know there's some. I might also add that I have talked with another member of our county board about doing some additional reaching out to Comstock and maybe some options that could be available to them that could be beneficial to them. So we'll be working on that, and once that happens, I'll report back more on that.
Maybe just a quick update on North Dakota legislative activities. I think you heard the update on the Minnesota legislative activities. Nobody used the follow-up joke, "Show me the money," to the Jerry Maguire joke that the mayor made. I thought that would have been appropriate. There's my bad attempt at humor. On the North Dakota side, we are also looking at trying to show us the money. So we had some success. We've just finished the first half of the North Dakota session. The second half started yesterday. There were several bills aimed at some of the land acquisition activities underway by water projects and political subdivisions around the state, not just this project, but several of those were defeated on both chambers. And so I think our focus of the second half is really on funding and financing. There's always other issues that can pop back up, but that's really been the focus. Commissioner Grinberg was not here, and Commissioner Peterson have been very vital to that effort, and so have others. And so I don't know if there's any other updates you want on that. The funding bill did pass through the Senate side, provided an additional $130-some million for the project over additional 2 bienniums. So I think that's good to show the state's willing to up their commitment and over a longer term. You know, it wasn't quite as much as we asked for, so I think we have some additional work to do. There's a new revenue forecast out in March, and there's maybe some other discussions and education we need to have with some new members on the House side. I don't know, Commissioner Peterson, is that anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, Mr. Schneider, I think you're spot on. I think the trick is that, in my perception is the need for the project is becoming less and less every year, meaning that we don't have to explain that and justify why we're doing it. It's a matter of allocating resources. And really, I think it's as cut and dry, and I'll believe Senator Wardner when he says, if you have a project, we will find the money. So, albeit less than what we're asking for right now, I will take him at his word that he will find us the North Dakota money when we are shovel ready and ready to go, which I think we probably are, but for sake of argument, let's say we're not. I think the resources will be there, and how we get there, I think is far easier than people are making it out to believe. We have coffers full of billions of dollars in cash, literally, not figuratively. It's a matter of the political will of accessing them. So I think when we get to the time of need, we will be provided for.
And maybe just one logistical update. It looks like our hearing is likely next Thursday in Bismarck. So those who want to attend that or plan to be a part of that, it looks like Thursday next week, next morning is the trip down there. So we'll have a good update on that tomorrow on our regular updates that we have every week. If there's any other questions.
Any other questions for Mr. Schneider?
Let Mr. Dodd steal the thunder on the lands outreach later on the agenda.
Okay. Do we have a Business Leaders Task Force update? Is there anyone here for that?
Several people here on the Business Leaders Task Force, but nobody
I know they've
officially
been busy,
represented.
and we really appreciate their hard work.
They did have a press conference last Friday. I'm sure you saw, Commissioner Sherling spoke at it, and several people here attended it. I thought it was, Councilmember Paulson also spoke at it. And I thought that was a good way to help get the message out there. I think it helped kick off the lands outreach as well as the letter to the editor the chair sent. So it was good to let people know what progress is being made, and I think they're eager and anxious to continue that discussion and to continue to keep the word out. I think it happened to coincide with the flood warnings, which is always a good reminder. We're on a 10-year anniversary coming up of the 2009 flood, so I think it's on people's minds again, which sometimes we can benefit from that, I guess.
Any questions? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 7, land management. I'm the chair also of the Land Management Committee. We met yesterday and had a really good meeting. We are geared up. Finally, we're moving forward with land purchases. I did have a letter to the editor in the Fargo Forum this last week, kind of letting people know that they could be seeing those letters come out in their mailboxes here in the next week or so. We sent out around 500 letters to affected property owners, and so we expect to be getting phone calls. We've certainly been, that's one of the concerns people have had a lot is, well, nobody's talking to me, and we really haven't been able to talk to people, and now we can move forward. So we're happy to be able to do that, and Eric's got his team all ready to go, and their pencils sharpened, so go ahead and tell us what's happening, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Eric Dodds, E2S with the program management team. Just a couple more notes on that lands outreach thing. Quite a bit of effort went into that. Appreciate everybody's time in reviewing the letters and packets. They are set to be landing in mailboxes on Monday, I guess in the mail tomorrow, and so landing soon. And we've got a good team in place both at the Water Resource District and in our shop set up to address phone calls should they arise, and I think we're anxious to hear from a lot of property owners. We've heard from quite a few over the past few months since the permit was issued, and anticipate hearing from quite a few more. So that's good news. We are definitely in gear and moving forward. Also related to moving forward, and Martin mentioned this in the PMC report, the Water Resource District issued an RFP for appraisal services back in January. We received 8 submittals, reviewed all of those. We are recommending, or have recommended, master service agreements with all 8, and we have divvied up the remaining appraisal work for the channel to 3 of those 8 firms. And so the contract actions are in place, are being put in place. with the Cass County Water District, and so moving forward with that appraisal process. So now we have a stable full of qualified appraisers that we'll be looking to assign more and more work to. As I mentioned, we've been getting these phone calls in from property owners who are anxious to move forward with the process, and so now we've got a good stable of appraisers that we can assign that work to and really keep the ball moving. Last thing I might mention is yesterday at the Land Committee, we had a discussion about the importance of working with impacted farmers. And to that account, we recommended, and the Land Committee approved, establishing a farm impacts working group. The intention of this is to be a small working group with farmers who are actually impacted by the project. We've had some good discussions with a few of these folks, sort of, sidebar type discussions, and we're trying to bring just a touch more formality to that working group. It's not going to be a formal committee or anything like that, but it would be a group where we can get some collective minds to the table and help deal with some of the nuances that are associated with relocation of farmsteads. So anxious to get forward with that process as well. Nothing else to report unless there's questions.
Any questions for Mr. Dodds? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 8, Finance Committee Report. Item 8A, Mr. Steen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 8A in your packet. Mr. Nicholson touched on most of this already. The committee report, first quarter so far, the first month to date. Revenues, $4,095,000 have been collected. Expenditures to date, $1,313,000. Page 2 of 8A packet, cash available currently $88,087,000. Some minor receivables, total liabilities of $1,321,000. In the net position at this point, $87,789,997. Third page is just a summary of information I've already touched on. The remaining pages are pretty much just detail of the expenditures to date. The group yesterday the Finance Committee recommended receive and file report. On that, any questions on the committee report?
Any questions for Commissioner Steen? If not, is there a motion?
So moved. Whalen.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the committee report. Roll call, please.
I think you can do a voice vote.
Oh, voice vote on this one. All in favor, aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. On to the voucher approval.
Item 8B in your packet, a small number of payables this month around. The Finance Committee yesterday recommended approval. Vouchers totaling $233,576.70. I would so move approval at the board.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Peterson seconds. Now a roll call vote.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Judd?
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Aye.
Mr. Paulson?
Aye.
Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Item 8C, recommended contracting actions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Nicholson to come and go through the recommended contracting actions for us today.
Madam Chair, members of the board, there are a number of contracting actions, both approved by the COEDs, by the Joint Board, Cass County Joint Board, and then some for action by this board. I'll go through the co-executive director approved task order amendments. First, there's one for Houston Moore Group for task order 28, amendment 1, boundary survey services to add scope and budget and extend the period of performance in the amount of $103,000. And that is the only one that was for just by the co-executive director for the Diversion Authority. The remainder are for Cass County Joint Water Resources District task orders that have been reviewed and approved by the co-exec directors. There are 3. Task Order 4, Amendment 3 for property acquisition services to Houston Moore Group. That's to remove some scope, add scope, extend the preferred period of performance, and amend Exhibit B property tables. That resulted in a negative budget adjustment of approximately $177,000. Task Order 2, Amendment 1 for property acquisition services for ProSource Technologies. Again, removes from appraisal services scope, adds BioGeo services scope and budget, project management, and Exhibit B, property tables amendment. And that was for an increase of $656,000. And Task Order 2, Amendment 2 for Ultag engineers. Again, similar adjustments in removing appraisal services and then amending their property tables and extending the period of performance. And that was a negative $30,185 for a sum total of $448,420. Final is a construction change order number 2 for in-town levies, general landscaping and plantings. Some unit quantity balancing and contract time change with Hoffman and McNamara, probably said that incorrectly, for a deduction of $9,299.69. Those are the co-executive director approved actions. The contracting actions for approval today by the Diversion Authority involve Task Order 25, Amendment 2 for hydrology and hydraulic modeling with Houston Moore Group to add scope and budget for Phase 9 H&H modeling and extending the period of performance in the amount of $194,816. And Task Order 26, Amendment 1 to support work-in-kind projects to add budget for local drainage, transportation, and utility updates on the southern embankment, and to add scope and budget for design reviews and extend the period of performance. And that's in the amount of $541,306. So total is $736,122. And there are 2 additional construction change orders. If you want to take those all at once, or if you want to do these, you want to take them all at once? Okay, I'll review those as well. And these are construction change orders. First is for Work Package 42E, change order number 1 for in-town levies. That's to remove the Main Avenue project overlap work items from the contract and add some CLSM pipe cradles, foundation debris removal, and gate wall structure backfill with IBI, and that is a deduction of $240,636.15. And Work Package 43 CD, change order number 6 for the OHB ring levy phases C and D with Meyer Contracting. That's to balance quantities, add various changes to the contract, and add contract time. And that's for a net increase of $203,981.64 for a total net decrease of $36,381.51 for construction change orders. These 4 contracting items for approval were reviewed yesterday in Finance, came out of Finance Committee with a recommendation for approval by the board.
Commissioner Steen.
As Mr. Nicholson noted, the Finance Committee did recommend approval of the contracting actions, and we did review as well the co-director's change order recommendations. I would like to move to approve the action items and contracting actions as noted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? I just have one kind of non-related, but you're talking about the OHB work. If we have a flood this spring, do we need to do any additional temporary diking, or are they good? Depends.
I'll let
Here comes Jason.
I'll let Jason answer that
It all
because he's much more in
depends.
tune with what temporary measures are going to be required.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. So with the OHB project, basically they've got about 98% of the work complete on the embankment east of County Road 81. The one area that there's still a gap is where until the rest of the drainage work gets completed as part of the retention pond, lift station, and storm sewer work, there's still a gap in the existing levee for drainage to flow out. We would have to bring in, I'm guessing, a number of loads. I don't know if it's 10 or 20 loads of clay to fill that gap and secure that levee at that drainage point, and then put in a temporary pump station to pump that water up and over the levee during a flood event. But for the most part, they're pretty well protected. It's just filling that small gap.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Judd?
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Aye.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. And on to item 8D.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 8D is with regard to hourly rates for our main contractors going forward, Houston Moore Group, Jacobs, and AE2S. And I believe Mike has taken the stand to walk us through this. Thank you, Mike.
So real briefly, Madam Chair and members of the authority, thank you. The last two items of business the Finance Committee took up yesterday were rate adjustments for 2019 for the Houston Moore Group, and then following that, the Jacobs PMC team, which includes AE2S. On the HMG side, I'll take both matters and then answer any questions that you have at the end. The HMG contract was effective back in 2012, and the MSA does provide for HMG to receive a 3.5% adjustment annually, and this request that was unanimously approved by the Finance Committee yesterday is to go to the contractual allowance of 3.5% effective of February 1 of 2019. And I'd also note that this is consistent with the approved budget that the authority has adopted for 2019. So a summary of that information is included. And then on the Jacobs side, the PMC team, including AE2S, the PMC also is permitted an allowance to increase their rates and charges. That is a 3% allowance. And what we're going to do in that case is approve an adjustment on Task Order 4, which is our Property Acquisition Management Services. That was executed on January 23 of 2019, so primarily on the AE2S side. So this request that was approved by Finance yesterday is retroactive to that approval for that 3% allowance. And then the PMC, Jacobs has refrained from increasing any of their rates for the remainder on Task Order 2, the interim program management task order that was dated April 2 of 2018 and was amended also on that same day last month in January of 2019. So this will also be approved for future task orders that are approved for the PMC. And again, like the former, these are also dollars that are contained in the budget. It's already approved, and these are permittable in both MSA agreements. So again, unanimous recommendations of the Finance Committee to approve yesterday, and we answered a few questions about that process, but happy to answer any questions you'd have. Thank you.
Questions? Commissioner Steen.
As Mr. Redlinger noted, the Finance Committee did review this yesterday and recommended approval of the proposed rate increases. I will move that the proposed rate increases be approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded to approve. Are there any questions or comments? Any questions or comments? Then a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Sherling?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Judd?
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Wayland?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Is there any other business?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a question for Jason Benson. Jason, County Road 17, south of Horace, the intersection of 17 and 16. Do we have any plans for that this summer?
All right.
Great question. We have an answer.
Thank you. So we have been working with the Corps, and we're also working with our legal team. Right now, our goal is to, in working with the Corps, to leave the temporary bypass road in its current position and not have to move it east or modify it for some other area. Because of the location it's at right now, if we can leave it, it won't further impact the inlet control structure or future bridge construction on the diversion channel itself. So with that in mind, we would like to move forward with with paving this summer to obviously not a permanent paving, but a temporary maintenance paving to improve the surface, and looking to, again, we'll continue to work through on the legal side as we determine what we can and can't do with the ongoing activities in injunction. But if everything works out that we can, the goal would be to request next month from this board to reimburse the county for that paving, and then moving forward, we would try to do some sort of bidding and awarding through the county and paving this summer. But again, that's still working through on the legal side before we bring that to the board.
And then one more question. Will there be any weight restrictions after that pavement is down? You know, for the farmers going up to the elevator at Horace, or?
I wouldn't anticipate that we would, outside of normal spring load restrictions. It would not be as robust of a road section as far as the thickness of asphalt, because it would only be something that we would have there for 2 to 3 years versus, you know, a normal county road that, you know, we have a 30-year, 40-year lifespan on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just add that we've had a lot of activities this last month, even though we just have had this meeting once a month. We are penciled in to have it twice a month, but if there's no contracting actions, we would probably anticipate to cancel that, but we just have that on your calendar. During the past month, there's been a lot of trips made by this group and many of you in the audience to St. Paul, to Bismarck. Several of us went to DC. I would just mention that when we went to DC, we had very, I think, successful meeting, very promising meetings. We met with the congressional delegates. We were with Senators Klobuchar and Smith, Congressman Armstrong, Senator Kramer and Senator Hoeven. We went to and visited with CORE, OMB, and the Assistant Secretary to the Army of Civil Works. And the whole purpose of that trip was to get an extension, an agreement to amend our PPA to reflect the new funds that were going to be required to construct the project. I would just mention that Senator Hoeven has been just really supportive in this project with us and has helped us immensely out in DC. And we appreciate, of course, all of our representatives out there. But hopefully they understand that time is of the essence, and we've got things going on in Bismarck, so we're hoping to hear a positive word on that before the end of the session. We'll wait and see, but I just want to thank all of the people here in this room. The staff works really hard on this project, and they have to work with a bunch of elected officials, and that may not always be easy. And yeah, they're taking trains, planes, and automobiles with us too, and we're taking them away from their families, and we really appreciate that. The people that are sitting up here don't get paid an extra dime whatsoever to do the work that they're doing on the project, and I can tell you this project takes more time than any other committee that I'm on, and so I really appreciate all of you doing that. You know, we had a moment on the way to Bismarck, and a car came across the median at us, and I was glad Martin was at the wheel. And you know, we have those times, you know, constantly. Every week we're traveling back and forth. But the other thing I want to make sure people understand is those of you in the audience, the business leaders and the people in the Red River Basin Commission, and those people that come up to me all the time wondering, when are we going to get this project done, especially with the outlook that we're seeing this spring. So you know, our work is important, and I just want to thank everybody in the room that's helping get this done. So is there any other business? With that, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
And we are adjourned. Thank you all.